Hey everyone, Ariel Adams of the Blog to Watch. I'm here in Hong Kong interviewing Michael Young, the founder of Classic Watch Repair. Thanks for having me here, Michael.
Hi, Ariel.
So this is sort of a little hidden getaway for Rolex lovers. And
Yes.
when I first entered here, I was immediately impressed by not only the selection of these very rare Rolex watches, but their quality. You are a Rolex watch restorer and you're one of the best. How did you learn how to do all that?
I think everything started when I started collecting Rolexes, like when I was 15 years old. You know, I have so many Rolex that are not in tip-top condition. And, you know, there's no shop in the world that really specializes in getting all the aesthetics done, getting all the movement fixed. So, you know, even buying a Rolex, to find a vintage Rolex that is even waterproof, it's difficult. You know, you buy them from dealers, no one can say it's waterproof. So, you know, that sparked my interest to actually start, you know, looking into it. You know, how I can actually fix my own watches, basically. I mean, everything comes from myself, you know.
So the idea today of going around and picking up a bunch of like old not working Rolex watches, that's really hard to do,
Yes.
right? Because the market obviously knows that this is a valuable item. And
Correct.
most of them are just not available.
Correct.
At the time that you were a kid, basically,
Yes.
collecting these, how difficult was it to get an old Rolex?
Actually, when I started collecting, there weren't really a big market for vintage Rolex. You know, they just call them second-hand Rolexes. You know, there wasn't really a collector's market. I started because I kind of like Rolexes, you know. I started as a college student, you know, I didn't have a lot of money. So I bought the cheapest Submariner I could get my hands on. And, you know, it turned out to be a super rare item. It was a 5510, which I bought for 500 Australian dollars, which is like 300 US. And now it turns out to be a super rare item. It was only produced for 1 year. But it didn't even have a band for it, you know. I couldn't find a band to fit it. And, you know, the one I got was a very sloppy band. You know, I tried to find a good condition one that fits it, but couldn't find it. So that really sparked my interest to start taking apart some bands, fix my own band.
So how do you go from being a hobbyist enthusiast who is doing some of your own, we'll call it restoration work,
Right.
to having a business where you're doing this for clients?
Right. Basically, in restoration of bands and other things, you need some parts. You know, I go to factories that custom make my parts, and they're all asking a minimum order for like 500 pieces, 1,000 pieces, and I probably need only 10. So I was saying, what do I do with the other 480 pieces? Why don't I offer to other people in the world that has the same needs? You know, that was just about sharing, really. And, you know, I didn't really intend to go into a restoration business. That was not my original intent. It was just to, you know, finish up my own hobby watches.
Give some advice to people out there who may have a vintage Rolex and are considering what we'll call restoration.
Right.
A lot of people know that when you go ahead and you fix something old, if you don't
Yes.
use original parts,
Right.
you can negatively affect the value.
Correct.
But at some point, it's so old, not functioning, you
Yes.
can't even use it. Where is that sort of
Line draws.
Yeah,
right?
where's that line between I want to fix it, but I don't want to do too much? What is for people too much, and what are some things that they might be afraid to do that in reality actually are going to increase value and not decrease it?
Right. So the major line that draws with restoration is never really touch the dial. You know, dial is pretty much everything now for vintage watches. But I think casework stuff you can still work on. I mean, as long as you're not trying to tell people this is a new old stock watch, I think it's good. You know, some people prefer it to look like brand new. Some people like it worn. I mean, it depends on your taste. There are some collectors that prefer watches that are never polished, you know, but that's very rare. You know, like 50 years without polishing is just like not cleaning your car for 20 years.
So what about when a watch movement or a case has something broken that needs to be actually replaced?
Right.
Where do you draw the line then?
Okay. Basically, movement parts, you can't really use any aftermarket parts. It's not interchangeable. So that's a little bit of a myth. You know, if you take out a mainspring, probably you can use an aftermarket. But most of the other parts, you have to use genuine parts. So, but for other parts like in a band, you know, basically there are no particular markings for a band. You know, you can always, as you know, it's really good with Rolex that they make everything to spec. So changing different straps doesn't really change the value of a watch. So you can find better quality watch straps and put it on your watch, and it's the same watch basically.
A lot of people who have customized Rolex watches,
Yes.
slightly different than what you do,
Yes.
have tried to take their watch to Rolex directly for service.
Yes.
And a lot of people have stories where Rolex has said, no, we're no longer going to work on this.
Right.
And there's this culture out there of what Rolex will accept back and what they won't. And so the question is, at what point does Rolex actually say, don't touch it?
Yes.
Because we won't work on it? And what point are they like, we don't do this, but go to someone like Michael Young who does?
Right. So basically, my understanding with Rolex Service Center is that if you have actually replaced any part to a non-genuine part, they will reject to do service on their watches. And even blackening out the watch, they will refuse to do that. So, I mean, then you can't go back to the original service center. But we are pretty much a specialist restoration service center. So we pretty much take anything that's genuine to service it.
Do you know from your customers what percentage are restoring watches that they originally bought a long time ago and still been wearing versus people that purchased something vintage not in great condition with the idea of restoring it either for collectability or to wear?
I would say about 50-50.
Really?
You know, 50% will be the heirloom watches. You know, it's probably a watch from the grandfather or something. May not be a particularly expensive watch, but something that has sentimental value. So we service two types of customers. Picky collectors, you know, we can really service to a high standard. And also for these heirloom customers, you know, they really want to get the watch working because there's no reason to have a watch that doesn't work. You know, the extreme cases, I had a really bad watch from a banker who inherited a gold watch. It's not a big name brand, but it has a broken lug on the watch case, and the movement doesn't work. You know, he simply said, Michael, get this fixed. I don't care how much it costs to fix it. So we actually went out and got the goldsmith to actually cut a piece of gold, and we laser welded the lug back to the case, and we restored the whole watch for him. He was so happy with it. I mean, I didn't charge a lot to this customer, but you know, the amount, the happiness you see on his face, I mean, that keeps me going.
So let's talk about cost for a second, because I
Right.
think that if you've ever had a watch even serviced, you have a little bit of hesitation
Yes.
for ever doing it again.
Right.
And restoration work is something that, if you're familiar with the art, can not only be time consuming, but
Right.
very, very expensive.
Right.
Same thing with watches.
Yes.
What do you say to someone who is interested in restoration work but is concerned about potential cost? I know that prices are across the board very different, and you don't always get what you pay for.
Yeah.
By no means.
Yes.
What advice can you give to people on what they should be spending, how to determine a fair price, things like
Right.
that?
I think it really depends. The cost of restoration depends on parts availability. So if you choose a very rare watch, but that's not expensive, it might cost you a lot to restore because finding parts for it will be difficult. But actually restoring Rolexes usually aren't that expensive because a lot of parts are interchangeable. Like in the movements, they use it on their standard 3-hand watch, they use it on the sports models. So they are readily available. So it's not really only on brands, it's also on models. If they're popular, it's usually the parts are available.
So let's talk some specific numbers in US dollars.
Right.
Obviously, every restoration work is a little bit different.
Right.
But is there an average or an average range
Yeah.
in the price that it costs for the
Right.
typical work that you do?
Yeah, so basically let's take a Rolex Submariner. So if you need to service the movement, it's around 200 US. And if you have a sloppy band, if we need to rebuild it like pretty much like brand new, it's about another $200. And if you need a case reshape, just to get the right shape back and polish, it's another $200. So about 600 in total.
Now, you mentioned something interesting about dials.
Yes.
Don't touch the dials.
Yes.
Does that also include the hands?
Yes, because people prefer the same luminous material as a dial. So if it, if the color is a little bit
If it
different,
doesn't match.
yeah, it doesn't match. It doesn't look natural. So I mean, some people prefer the dial to have luminous on it, but honestly, after 30, 50 years, it's going to lose its luminosity. So, I mean, try not to touch the lume. I mean, that's what collectors look for, all originality on a dial.
What are some watches that come in that you're excited to see? Maybe they're rare, maybe you just happen to like them or like to work on them.
Right.
What are some of the Rolexes that come in, common, uncommon, that you're very happy to get in?
Yeah, I mean, I have, you know, a particular thing about unpolished watches. You know, people wearing for 50 years without polishing and it still looks crisp and clean. You know, those are things that are really rare. And also for watches that has the full box and papers. You know, who would keep everything, you know, intact, even the purchase receipts. So those are the things that I look for. I mean, we get very rare items in here. You know, we have Comexes, we have Paul Newman. It's not just the price thing. You know, for me, it's just, you know, getting a full box set. You know, it's just like getting a full history. We just sold a Rolex Comex, which is a diving watch. So the guy who sold it actually brought in his whole set of diving logs. He's a commercial diver. I mean, he's giving me logbooks for covering at least 20 years.
Wow.
It's like, you know, he's bringing like all his career life to you. You know, it has, you know, all the details of every dive he had in his diving
Why did he
career.
bring you those papers?
Because he's selling the watch, and papers are very important in the history of the watch. You have to prove this watch was a real Comex. So, I mean, diving logs is the best way, you know. A lot of the Comexes weren't actually issued to divers, but this particular one was an original diver's Comex, yeah.
So what are some specific restoration stories that illustrate the complexity of the work you do, or
Yeah.
just some common types of repair work that a lot of people out there probably need? Maybe they don't even know they need it.
Right. So the extreme case was where I had a Daytona, which was run over by a car.
Wow.
I mean, who would do that? But yeah, but that does happen. And it has a ruined bezel. The case was, you know, deformed. Lucky the movement wasn't too badly damaged. We just had to change a few parts, change the crystal. So we actually reshaped the case. We fixed the bezel, and we got it up and running.
How old was this Daytona?
This Daytona wasn't too old. It's like about 15 years old.
Okay, so relatively
Relatively
modern.
new, yes.
Would that have been a very different job with the vintage Daytona?
It wouldn't be too much of a difference, honestly. Yeah, I mean, cases are made of stainless steel.
Now, a lot of people have particular high esteem for your bracelet work.
Yeah, thank you.
Some people call you the bracelet magician.
Right.
What is it that you do so well, the bracelets? Why would somebody come to you, and where is it that other service providers are not able to perform the same bracelet restoration tasks?
Right, so basically let's take Rolex. You know, Rolex is a manufacturer of watches. They don't actually do services to actually take apart bands. You know, they will prefer to sell you a new band. So what vintage lovers like is to have the period correct bracelet to match with the watch. So what we do is actually we reverse the manufacturing process. We take things apart, we do special tools to pull links apart. We actually change the inner pins to make sure they are strong. So we actually have to manufacture some little bits and parts to make it look like new. Not only on the outside, but it's strong enough to wear. So,
could this work you do happen anywhere in the world, or is there something about the resources and the labor available here in Hong Kong that makes this work particularly suited to this region of the world?
yes, of course, you know, we only charge like $180 to $200 to restore a band, and we practically have to put in about 6 to 7 hours of work. You know, looking at the rates of labor in the States, how much is it? Like, what, $30, $20 an hour?
If someone specialized like that would certainly charge more.
Yeah, so you take, let's say $50, 7 hours, that's $350.
Right.
You know, how can you do it for $200? So,
It's a good value.
yeah, so basically, I'm pretty open to it. I've even put on forums how to actually take apart links. It's just that commercially it's not viable for a lot of people. So we're lucky here that labor is not too expensive, and also because I have actually designed tools, specific tools to do this restoration.
Give me an example of where some of the art comes in. I know with painting restoration,
Yes.
if you want to go back and fix something, you have to make some creative decisions. How bright do I want this color?
Right.
How do I want this polish to be? Talk to me a little bit about how the restoration process has an artistic element versus just a sort of technical element where you just rinse and repeat a process again and again.
Right. So basically, you know, in a metal band, when you use it, metal get polished off. You know, at the corner, it will be all rounded. You probably just get a chopped off corner on links. So if you don't restore it properly, then it will still be there. So I had to find ways of actually fixing that. But how can you fix a broken piece of metal? So I was looking all around how to do that. You know, I was looking at different industries. Then I actually worked with a jeweler, and he was just welding his wedding rings. And I thought I had this idea was to take this laser welding technique and put it onto our bands. So we actually rebuilt the metal that is worn on the corners, and then we reshape it, we file it back to look like new.
But to a degree, you also need to make it look not quite new, because it's not a new watch.
Correct.
And so it's like new enough,
Yes.
but also it has that, I hate to use the word patina, but it's a patina of age, a patina of wear.
Right, right.
And that means you can't just do a perfect polish.
No.
Sometimes you have to have a polish that matches it. And to
Correct.
me,
Yes.
that's a lot of creative decision making,
Correct.
even in a relatively minor and routine service operation.
Yes. So basically, we take a polish, we'll have a look at the band. You know, we'll apply the finish on it, but we won't over polish. If you over polish, you will lose the logos, you'll lose the markings. So I have to be careful with every polish. It's different. You know, if you have very deep scratches, we'll leave them there. We'll leave a little bit of scratches. So our bands will not be 100% like brand new. It will be like 80, 90%, you know. So you still get a little bit of sloppiness, so it's not overly tight. If it's too tight, it doesn't feel right. You know, it's a 60-year-old watch. How can it be 100%?
Now, the name on the door is Classic Watch Repair, and most everything in here is Rolex.
Yes.
Obviously, there's a lot of business. Say something to people that have a classic watch that isn't a Rolex
Yes.
and might want to get it repaired. Are they going to have the same level of service, the same level of interest?
Yes, definitely. I mean, we welcome any brands, you know, expensive or non-expensive, honestly. I mean, to us, it's serving the client to have happy customers, you know. We see that, you know, people say, wow, I mean, it comes back like brand new. I mean, the happiness on their faces is what's important.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much.